Welcome to Pro Practice, your guide to piano mastery. I'm Josh Wright, and today's tutorial is based on the sixth piece of the Opus 30 Songs Without Words by Felix Mendelssohn. This piece, the Venetian Gondola Song, is one of my favorites and definitely a crowd favorite among the songs without words. This is very heavily played, and for good reason. It's just gorgeous and very picturesque of what it is describing. Before we get started with today's tutorial, I'll go ahead and just play maybe a page or so here to get started, in case you're not familiar with it. This piece was written and published in the early to mid 1830s. I believe he was writing them in 1833 through 1834, and it was scheduled to be published in 1835. These songs without words were very accessible to amateur pianists, so they were very popular during that day, but they also kind of gave Mendelssohn that amateurish type label as a composer, not as serious as maybe some other composers. And that is completely unfounded. These are simply accessible works, and I love Mendelssohn's other piano output very much, as well as these. I think these are brilliant. I loved playing the serious variations, Opus 54. I played the Mendelssohn G minor concerto when I was quite young. I really adore Mendelssohn. This is the first piece we've covered in Pro Practice, and I'd like to dedicate this to Milia, one of our Pro Practice Lifetime Access members. And I hope today's tutorial can be of benefit to each of you watching and seeking a little more inspiration. I'll give you many different ideas with pedaling, fingering, different ideas with interpretation, how we can vary the shaping and voicing and dynamics on the repeated sections, and then just general advice on how to perform this more effectively. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. I always like to start tutorials, especially soft ones, with how to approach the technique and also the touch. I think something that we should always keep in mind is don't fight your instrument. As much as possible, be very intimate with your instrument. Be very loving with the touch. I know that sounds a little silly. It's an inanimate object. But I've heard many top-rated pianists and teachers say, touch the piano as if you're touching the hand of someone you love. So if I think of my wife or daughter or little baby boy, I don't grab their hand like that. So be very gentle with your touch. Flatten the fingers slightly. That will put more surface area on the keys. And then you can use all sorts of movement in the hand. I generally like to think of 3 points of rotation in the hand. Maybe a doorknob turn. You have this waving, this lateral rotation, and then you have this kind of hinge up and down. You can use all of those at your disposal whenever you need to navigate to make things more comfortable. So as I go here, you can think of coming around a little bit like that. You can also think of kind of coming over like you're turning a doorknob there. And you can combine those. I think I would use one pedal for that first part, and I would use the una corda pedal, the far left pedal. I would let it off for this first note, and then you can put it back down for that resolution. Because he marks forte, and then it's much less, so I think it's fine to put that una corda back down. The reason I'm using the una corda pedal is not because I can't play it soft. Listen how soft I can play it without it. It's plenty soft. However, it just gives a little bit more of this like velvety timbre or tone color, because you're literally playing on a different part of the felt of the hammer, which hasn't been beaten to death in its static position. So as we push that una corda pedal down, if you're on a grand piano, you're going to be shifting those the whole key bed to the right, and you'll be playing on pieces of felt that haven't been hit as many times. So that gives it a little bit more magical of a timbre. So feel free throughout this piece to use the una corda pedal not as a volume tool, but as a coloring tool. So if you can get a different timbre or tone color, or if you want to think of a different effect or a different shade of light, however you want to think of that, very helpful to think along those lines. By the way, I'm using the Henley edition. I love their app. I think it's brilliant. And I've always admired Henley for their accuracy of their scores. They've done a very thorough job with this. Apparently, Mendelssohn would write letters to his publishers apologizing, saying, no, I want to change these things. So you might find differences between editions. There might even be differences between this Henley edition and what you might be using. So just keep that in mind. Not every edition is the exact same with these. And he was also publishing them simultaneously in different countries at the same time. So he has German edition, English edition, and then he had a French or Italian edition, depending on where he was publishing at the time. So just keep that in mind. Also, recordings that you can consider listening to. If you listen to my favorite pianist in the world, Sergei Babayan, he actually has a recording of this. His recording output is much lower than I would like because he's my favorite pianist. So we're very lucky to have this beautiful piece recorded by him, Daniel Barenboim. I also listened to Joel Hastings' recording. He has wonderful rubato in his. You'll notice quite different tempos tempi taken by each of those pianists. Babayan and Barenboim tend to take it a little bit slower. Babayan, I just tapped the metronome, and it was around 52, so quite slow. Hastings was a bit faster, and there's many other recordings out there, so you could take it faster like that. But I noticed in Babayan's recording, who I admired the most out of all of those pianists, and it's up to you if you want that pedal to bleed over until there. So, or you can have a clean pedal and then you can change it if you'd like. Or in this edition, I don't know if this is an autograph pedal marking or if it was written by one of the publishers, they have it holding. I think it gets a little muddy from my ear, but it's up to you, whatever you'd like to do. I think both ways are very convincing. And then we have these beautiful little counter lines in the left hand. So really sing that out, and then less. And that really brings in the beauty of the right hand coming in there. He marks allegretto tranquillo, so very like moving but peaceful at the same time, calm. So then when the melody is brought in, it's marked piano but cantabile, so with a great singing quality. So don't be afraid to dig into your melody a little bit. You don't want it to be brash or harsh, but probably bring that soft pedal off so the right hand. And let me just tell you a little habit that I've gotten into that seems to really help. I do this with a lot of my students. Anytime you see 3 of the same melody notes, one after another, generally those are very effective to diminuendo with. A lot of students are thinking, oh, I'm just bringing this in, so... And it sounds forced, it sounds contrived, versus go to there, really open up, and then let it be calm. What that does, that creates momentum for your next phrase. You can crescendo and then diminuendo. And then if you diminuendo there, in bar 11, you can be very soft and start another crescendo here to the sforzandos. And one thing I didn't do on my original playthrough is tie that the whole time. Make sure you do that. So hold it all the way to there, and then another thing that you can do.